Welcome Beyond the Text by 6-7.
Today we are stripping away the fortune cookie philosophy to find the real man, a man who lived in chaos, failed at politics, but created a moral code that has outlasted empires. We're talking about ghosts, the refusal to pray, and why love is harder than it looks. This is the sayings of Confucius.
I have to say, this one feels different right out of the gate. Usually when we talk about ancient philosophy, we expect, a lot of mysticism, maybe some mountaintop revelations. But looking at the source material today, specifically the Leonard A. Lyell translation of the sayings of Confucius, we are landing in something much, much grittier.
It is grittier, and it's surprisingly modern in its skepticism. We have this image of Confucius as this ultimate religious figure, almost a deity himself in some traditions.
Right, like a statue in a temple.
Exactly. But when you go back to the text, especially this translation, which is known for being very sparse and very close to the original Chinese structure, you find a man who is actively, almost aggressively avoiding the supernatural.
That is exactly what we need to unpack. Because if he isn't getting his rules from a burning bush or, some divine voice, where are they coming from?
That's the billion-dollar question.
But before we get to the atheism, or the agnosticism, I guess we should probably call it, we need to talk about the book itself. Because the Analects, or as Lyell calls it, the sayings, isn't a book he actually wrote, is it?
No, and that's a crucial distinction. Confucius didn't sit down and write a manifesto. He didn't leave a diary or a treatise. Nothing. This text is a compilation. It's a collection of fragments, memories, snippets of conversation, and observations. And here is the kicker. It was likely compiled by his disciples and even the students of his disciples around 400 BC.
So that's decades after he died.
Decades. We're talking maybe 40, 50 years, maybe even longer for some parts. Imagine trying to reconstruct the exact wording of a conversation you had with a mentor 40 years ago.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
You'd remember the gist, the feeling.
You'd remember the impact. And that's what this book is. It's not a transcript. It's a record of impact. These are the things that stuck. These are the moments that burn themselves into the memories of the people who followed him.
So it gives the text a very disjointed feel, but also, like you said, a very intimate one.
It does. You aren't getting a polished thesis. You're getting the raw data of a life lived in public. It's almost like eavesdropping on his greatest hits.
It feels like reading someone's Twitter feed from 2,500 years ago,
Yeah.
but curated by their biggest fans.
That's a great way to put it.
But let's set the scene, because context is everything here. We are in the land of Lu, around 550 BC, and I think most of us have this sort of Disney movie idea of ancient China, beautiful pagodas, everyone bowing, tea ceremonies, perfect order.
Yeah, that's not it.
The source material just throws that out the window immediately.
It absolutely does. The introduction to the Lyell translation makes a comparison that I think is brilliant for Western readers. It compares the state of China at this time to Germany during the worst, most chaotic days of the Holy Roman Empire.
That is not a flattering comparison. The Holy Roman Empire was famously neither holy nor Roman nor an empire.
No, it was a mess. And that's an accurate comparison for Zhou Dynasty China. You had the dynasty technically on the throne. They were the emperors. But the text describes the dynasty as effete.
Meaning powerless.
Utterly powerless. They were figureheads. The real power had fractured into these vassal states run by warlords and dukes. And even within those states, the dukes were losing control to powerful families and clans. It was a nesting doll of rebellion.
So the emperor can't control the dukes can't control the clans, and the clans are probably all fighting each other.
Exactly. It was a time defined by, to quote the text, lust, extravagance, and cruelty. The old moral order had completely collapsed. Neighbors were invading neighbors. Sons were plotting against fathers. It was a world where right was determined exclusively by who had the biggest army.
Sounds like Game of Thrones without the dragons.
Yeah.
Just pure political cutthroat chaos.
That is the perfect analogy. And it's into this seething torrent, that's a phrase used in the book, that Confucius steps in. And his mission wasn't to start a new religion. He wasn't trying to be a prophet.
He actually explicitly denies being an inventor, doesn't he? He says he's just a transmitter.
He does. He describes himself as a teller and not a maker. He claimed he was just transmitting the wisdom of the ancients, the people who lived before the chaos started. But in doing so, he ended up creating, essentially, the operating system for Chinese civilization.
And the most fascinating part, the part we are really going to drill down on today, is that he did all of this. He built this massive moral framework while holding a view on God and the afterlife that would, frankly, get you kicked out of most churches today.
Oh, absolutely. It's radical.
Let's get into that. Segment 1. the man behind the philosophy. Because before he was a sage on a pedestal, he was just a guy trying to pay the bills.
He was. And he started from the bottom. He was born to a military officer, but his father died when he was very young. The family was poor, not just, middle class, but genuinely poor. He married at 19, and his early career. He wasn't teaching philosophy in a beautiful garden.
No, he was counting things.
He was counting things. He was a keeper of the granary and a superintendent of public fields.
So he was a mid-level bureaucrat. He was counting sacks of rice and making sure the sheep didn't wander off.
Precisely. And he didn't hide that. There's a wonderful line where he says, "Because I was poor when young, I can do many paltry things."
I love that, paltry things. He's not ashamed of it.
Not at all. He's almost proud of it. He's saying, I know how the world works. I know how to do the dirty work.
Yeah.
He wasn't some aristocrat floating in a palace disconnected from reality. He knew the value of a dollar, or a copper coin in his case.
It grounds him. But despite the drudgery of that work, he wasn't a drab person. I love the details about his personality. He wasn't this stiff, unapproachable statue we imagine.
Not at all. The disciples are very clear on this. They describe him as easy and cheerful in his free time. And he had this intense passion for the arts, particularly music. There is this wonderful anecdote about the Shao music.
This is the forgetting the taste of meat story, right? This one is wild.
It's amazing. He was visiting the state of Qi, and he heard the Shao, which was this ancient classical court music. And the text says he was so overwhelmed by the beauty and the harmony of it that for 3 months he knew not the taste of flesh.
That is a level of aesthetic appreciation I don't think I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
To be so moved by a piece of music that you literally stop caring about food. For 3 months.
I mean, think about that. He said, "I did not suppose that music could reach such heights." This tells us he wasn't just a logic machine. He wasn't just a moral calculator. He was a man of deep feeling, deep sensitivity. He believed that beauty and morality were profoundly connected.
But, and this is the big but, despite this brilliance and despite his passion, we have to remember in his own lifetime, he was pretty much a failure.
A total failure. We see statues of him everywhere now, but if you looked at his LinkedIn profile when he was alive, it would just be a series of open to work banners.
That's a harsh but fair way to put it.
It is. He spent about 13 years wandering the country, going from the state of Wei to Chen to Tsai, desperately trying to find a ruler who would listen to him. He wanted a job. He wanted to be a minister with real power so he could implement his way and fix the chaos.
And nobody hired him. Not one.
They would interview him, they would treat him with respect because he was already famous as a scholar, but they wouldn't give him the keys to the kingdom.
Why not?
Because the dukes wanted to know how to expand their armies or tax their peasants more effectively. Confucius was coming in and telling them to be moral, to cherish their people, to reduce taxes, and to lead by example.
That's not a winning sales pitch to a bunch of power-hungry warlords.
Not at all. And he was actually in real danger a lot of the time, too. This wasn't just a series of failed job interviews.
Right, he was surrounded in Kwang.
Surrounded in Kwang, mistaken for a notorious bandit. He was threatened by a military official named Huan Tui, who wanted to kill him. At one point in the state of Qin, he and his disciples ran out of food and were so weak they couldn't even stand up.
There's this tragic self-awareness he has about his role in all this. He calls himself a warning bell.
Yes, his disciples worry he's not being recognized, and one of them reports that a border warden said, "Heaven shall make the master into a warning bell." It's so poignant. A warning bell is something you ring when there is a fire or an invasion.
You ring it when something is terribly wrong.
Exactly. He saw himself as the alarm system for his civilization. He was ringing and ringing, trying to wake people up, but everyone just rolled over and went back to sleep.
So why stick with it? This is what I don't get. There's that scene with the madhead, Qi, and the recluses working in the fields. These are people who saw the world was garbage and just decided to drop out. They're farming, they're minding their own business. And they mock Confucius. They basically ask, why are you trying to stop a flood with a teaspoon?
The recluse was a valid, even respected life choice in ancient China. If the government is corrupt, you leave. You go to the mountains. You cultivate your own virtue and stay pure.
But Confucius rejected that path completely.
He did. When they mocked him, his response was incredibly humanistic. He said, "Can I herd with birds and beasts?"
I'm not a wolf. I'm not a hawk. I'm a human being.
Exactly. He's saying, I can't just go live with the animals. I belong to humanity. These are my people, even if they're a mess. And then he delivers the line that defines his entire life of struggle, his resilience. If the way were kept by all below heaven, I should not need to change them.
That is the ultimate answer to cynicism, isn't it? I'm trying to fix it because it's broken. If everything were fine, I'd be sishing.
It's the refusal to withdraw. He knows the odds are impossible, but his duty to his fellow humans outweighs his desire for personal peace and safety.
And this brings us to the most critical part of his motivation. Because usually when someone has this level of conviction, this save-the-world mentality, it comes from religious zeal. They think they're on a mission from God.
Right, they've had a vision.
But Confucius, not so much.
This is segment 2, the spiritual stance. And this is where we need to really pay attention to what isn't in the text. If you are looking for a prophet who claims to speak for the Creator, Confucius is not your guy. In fact, the text suggests a worldview that is functionally atheistic, or at the very least deeply, intentionally agnostic.
Okay, let's look at the evidence. Because he does use the word heaven-team, and he talks about spirits. But it seems like he's keeping them at a very long arm's length.
Arm's length is the perfect way to describe it. In Book 6, he gives a definition of wisdom. A disciple asks him what wisdom is, and he says wisdom is to honor ghosts and spirits and yet keep aloof from them.
Keep aloof. That is not worship them with all your heart. That is be polite at the party, but don't invite them back to your house.
It's exactly that. He acknowledges they are part of the cultural landscape. You know, people believe in them. So fine, be respectful of that. But don't get involved. Don't base your life on them.
And his disciples noticed this, right?
They did. In Book 7, it's just a simple declarative statement from them. The master never talked of goblins, strength, disorder, or spirits.
He just took those topics off the table.
Completely. He refused to speculate on the supernatural. It was a waste of time for him.
There is that famous exchange with his disciple Chi-Lu. Chi-Lu asks him about serving the ghosts and then asks about the meaning of death. And Confucius just shuts him down so hard.
It is one of the great shutdowns in philosophical history. It's so direct. First, on serving the dead, he says, when we cannot do our duty to the living, how can we do it to the dead?
It's such a pragmatic pivot. He's saying, you're asking about decorating the waiting room when the main house is on fire. Deal with the living first.
Precisely. And then, on the bigger question of death, he says, we know not life, how can we know death?
That is just, it's a showstopper. He's saying, you barely know how to be a decent human being right now, here on Earth. You haven't figured out life yet. Why are you wasting precious brain power on what comes after?
It shifts the entire focus of existence. In many, many religious traditions, this life is just a test. It's a waiting room for the next one.
The prequel.
The prequel, exactly. For Confucius, this life is the main event. This is it. The here and now is where moral action happens. Speculating about the afterlife is a distraction from the hard work of being good to your neighbor today.
But the most telling moment for me, the one that really hammers this atheist or humanist nail home, is the prayer incident.
Oh, yes. This is the smoking gun, if there is one.
Set it up for us.
So Confucius was very ill. He was old, likely near death. His disciple Zulu, who is always the most practical, the man of action, asks leave to pray for him. He wants to petition the gods, the spirits, to save the master.
A completely normal human reaction.
Of course, and Confucius's first response is a bit of dry wit. He asks, is such a thing done?
Which is just dripping with sarcasm, really.
Yeah.
He knows people do it.
He knows. And Zulu, being very earnest, says, yes, the memorials say, pray to the spirits above and earth below. He is quoting the religious texts of the time. He has a source for it.
And Confucius replies,
long-lasting has my prayer been.
Wow. Just let that sink in. Long-lasting has my prayer been.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that?
He means that his life was the prayer. His entire existence of trying to be a good person, of acting with integrity, of adhering to the way, his daily conduct, that was his connection to whatever moral order exists.
So he isn't asking for a favor from a deity. He's not trying to change the outcome.
Not at all. He is saying that his integrity, his righteousness, that was his prayer. He don't believe in petitioning a spirit to change the outcome of biology. He believed that if he had lived righteously, he had nothing to fear, and more importantly, nothing to ask for. The work was already done.
It reminds me of that other quote you mentioned earlier. A sin against heaven leaves no room for prayer.
Exactly. It's the same logic. You can't bribe the universe. If you have violated the fundamental moral order, no amount of incense or chanting or begging is going to fix it. And if you haven't violated it, then what's the point of begging?
So, if he's not praying to a personal God, What on earth is heaven? Because he does talk about Tian protecting him. When he was surrounded in Kuang, he said something like, heaven would not let this culture be destroyed.
This is where it gets nuanced, and it's a huge point of scholarly debate. But based on the text, heaven, Tian, for Confucius, isn't a guy with a beard on a cloud. It's not a personal creator who listens to your thoughts and intervenes.
So it's not Yahweh or God or Allah.
No, it's more like destiny or the bidding or the moral order of the universe. It's an impersonal force. It's the grain of reality. When he says heaven is with him, he means he is aligned with the way things should be. He felt he was part of a historical destiny to preserve culture, but not that a god was going to magically strike down his enemies with a thunderbolt.
It's almost like the laws of physics, but for morality. A kind of background principle.
That's a great way to put it. It's an objective standard, but it's not a person. It's a pattern, not a painter.
So here is the puzzle then. If he doesn't believe in personal spirits, if heaven is just an impersonal force, why was he so obsessed with rituals? The man loved a good ceremony. He was constantly talking about the proper way to bow, to sacrifice, to fix the mats. If the ghosts aren't eating the food, why sacrifice it?
This is the absolute genius of Confucian psychology. He separates the action of ritual from the belief in magic. He admits, point blank, that he doesn't even know the meaning of the great sacrifice.
He doesn't know what it's for.
He says if he knew, ruling the world would be as easy as looking at his palm. But then he gives us the key. He says he worshipped as if those whom he worshipped were before him.
As if, the two most important words.
The power is in the as if. The ritual isn't about the ghost. It's about the worshiper. It's a discipline. It's mental and emotional training. When you bow properly, when you offer the food with sincerity, you are cultivating a sense of reverence in yourself. You are practicing humility. You are connecting yourself to the lineage of your ancestors and your culture.
So it's a psychological tool. It's like making your bed in the morning. The bed doesn't care if it's made, but you feel more ordered and disciplined.
That's a perfect modern analogy. He says, for me, to take no part in the sacrifice is the same as not sacrificing. Meaning, if I just go through the motions without the inner feeling of reverence, it's a completely useless, empty gesture. But if I do it with sincerity, I change myself. He replaced magic with psychology.
That is a massive shift in human thought, and it leads us directly to the core of his moral system. Because if we aren't being good to please God or get into heaven or to avoid hell, we have to find a different engine for morality. We have to build it from the inside out.
And that engine is Ren.
Segment 3, the core virtue, love.
Now, we have to be really, really careful with this word. Lyle translates the Central Chinese concept Ren as love, and it's a bold choice. But you, as a listener, you need to wipe your brain clean of the modern, romantic, or even the strictly Christian idea of love.
Right. It's not, I love pizza, and it's not, I love my spouse in a romantic way.
No. Ren is often translated as benevolence, human-heartedness, or humaneness. It is the quality of being a fully realized human being in relation to other human beings. But Lyle uses love, so let's stick with that, as long as we understand it's a rigorous, disciplined, demanding kind of love.
So how does Confucius define it? Where does he lay it out?
In Book 12, his favorite disciple, the brilliant Yan Yuan, asks him about it. And Confucius gives a definition that sounds more like a battle plan. He says, love is to conquer self and turn to courtesy.
Conquer self. Not feel good about yourself. Conquer it. That sounds like a war.
It is a war. It is a constant internal war against your own ego. It's conquering your greed, your laziness, your anger, your desire to be the center of attention. And then turning to courtesy, submitting your conquered self to the rules of proper social behavior. So it's not a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's an act of will.
He also gives us the famous golden rule, but in this translation, it's what people call the silver rule.
Yes, it's the negative formulation. A disciple asks him for a single word to guide a life. One word.
That's a big ask.
A huge ask. And he says, fellow feeling, but then he clarifies, and the explanation is, do not do unto others what thou wouldst not have done to thee.
I have to say, I actually like the negative version better. It feels more practical, more foundational.
How so?
The positive version, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, can get complicated. Maybe I like people giving me brutally honest criticism, but you don't. So if I follow the positive rule, I might end up hurting you.
Yeah.
But the negative rule, it's just about restraint. It's about not causing harm. Don't be a jerk.
That's a great point. It keeps you from imposing your will on others. It's about checking your impulses. If you don't want to be insulted, don't insult. If you don't want to be cheated, don't cheat. It's the absolute bedrock of social harmony.
But he makes this love sound incredibly hard to achieve. He doesn't hand out participation trophies for it. He rarely tell anyone they actually have love.
He's very, very stingy with the label. His disciples are constantly asking him, does so-and-so have love? And he's almost always like, no, he's got courage but not love, or he's clever but not love.
So what are the signs? How would you know it if you saw it?
Well, he says love involves 5 things. You must practice 5 things to achieve it. Modesty, bounty, truth, earnestness, and kindness. And he also says love is slow to speak.
Slow to speak? That's interesting. In our culture, we value the quick, witty comeback.
He would hate that. For him, real virtue acts, it doesn't brag, it doesn't need to be loud. The person who is truly loving is careful with their words because they understand their power. If you have to tell everyone how good and compassionate you are, you probably aren't.
Now, here's the part of this that really shocked me. We think of a loving person as someone who loves everyone and everything. You know, the hippie guru who hugs trees and criminals alike. Total acceptance.
Universal love.
Yes. But Confucius says something very, very sharp. He says, love alone can love others or hate others.
It stops you in your tracks, doesn't it? Or
And,
hate others. That sounds so un-Confucian to our modern ears.
It sounds wrong, but what does he mean by it?
Think about the logic. If you truly deeply love goodness, if you love justice, kindness, honesty, then you must have a strong negative reaction to evil. If you see cruelty and injustice and you just smile and say, well, everything is one, it's all good, that's not love, that's apathy. That's moral cowardice.
So a moral person has to hate certain things. It's a requirement.
Yes. His disciples ask him if a gentleman hates. And Confucius says, without hesitation, yes. They hate the sounding of evil deeds, meaning they hate people who publicize the faults of others, they hate slander, and my favorite, they hate daring without courtesy.
Daring without courtesy. Let's break that down. That's the guy who is bold and loud and disruptive, but has no respect for others, no sense of social grace.
Exactly, the toxic disruptor. The person who mistakes their own aggression for courage. Confucius says a person of love rejects that entirely. Real morality requires discrimination. You have to be able to tell good from bad, and you have to take a side. You can't just be a mushy sponge of acceptance.
So if you do all this work, if you conquer the self, if you learn to love what's good and hate what's bad, what do you become? What's the end goal of all this self-cultivation?
You become a Junzi.
This brings us to segment 4, the ideal person.
The
Junzi, or as Lyle translates it, which I like, the gentleman.
Junzi. This is the goal of the entire system. And you have to understand, originally, the word meant a prince's son. It was a term of nobility by birth, an aristocrat.
So it was about your bloodline.
It was. And Confucius hijacked the word. He completely democratized it. He said, I don't care who your dad was. I don't care if you were born in a palace or a hut. If you have moral nobility, if you have cultivated your character, you are a gentleman.
It's a promotion based on merit, not birth.
An ethical meritocracy. And he defines this gentleman with one of the best metaphors in the entire book. It's in Book Pew. A gentleman is not a vessel.
A gentleman is not a vessel. It's so short, but it's so profound. What does that mean?
Think about a vessel, a pot, a cup, a screwdriver, a hammer. It has one specific function. It is a tool. A cup is designed to hold water. If you try to use it to hammer a nail, it shatters. It's limited.
So if I define myself just by my job, I'm a lawyer, I'm a coder, I'm a podcaster, I'm making myself a vessel.
Exactly. You are reducing your full humanity to a single utility. You are saying, I am a tool to be used. A gentleman, a Junzi, is not a tool. He is a whole, complete, adaptable human being. He has a moral core, this Ren, that works in any situation. He isn't limited to a single function. He is autonomous. He is the master of the tools, not the tool itself.
Wow. And he spends a lot of time contrasting this gentleman with the opposite, the small man. And again, small man doesn't mean a short guy.
No, it means a petty person, small in spirit. The contrasts he draws are just brutal and so insightful.
Give us some of the big ones.
Okay, so the gentleman cherishes mind. The small man cherishes dirt.
Dirt, meaning property, material things.
Land, money, stuff. The small man is obsessed with material gain, with his house, his possessions. The gentleman is obsessed with cultivating his character, his mind.
Okay, what else?
The gentleman asks of himself. The small man asks of others.
That's the blame game right there. When things go wrong, the gentleman looks in the mirror and asks, what did I do wrong? How can I be better? The small man looks out the window to see who he can sue or blame.
Perfectly put. He also says the gentleman is consistent, while the small man is stubborn. There's a subtle difference there.
The gentleman is consistent in his principles, but flexible in his application.
Exactly. The small man just digs in his heels, unable to see another point of view. And maybe the most famous one: the gentleman is calm and spacious, the small man is always fretting.
Always fretting. That is the background noise of modern life. We are all small men, constantly checking our phones, worried about the next email, the next news alert.
The anxiety of constant becoming. The gentleman is chill. He is calm and spacious because he knows he is doing the right thing. He has an internal peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. The small man is always chasing external validation, likes, promotions, money, so he is always, always anxious.
Now, a big part of being a gentleman is this concept of good form, or lie. Lyle translates it as courtesy. And I want to clarify this because courtesy sounds a little flimsy to us. It sounds like knowing which fork to use at a fancy dinner.
Right, sounds like etiquette.
But for Confucius, it's so much more. It's like the safety rails of society.
It is the structure that holds character together. It's the external expression of your internal morality. And he says that without courtesy, our virtues actually turn into vices.
This is a fascinating idea.
Listen to this list he gives. Without courtesy, attentions become fussiness. You're trying to be helpful, but you just become annoying and meddling. Without courtesy, he becomes fearfulness. You're trying to be cautious, but you just become timid and afraid to act. Without courtesy, daring becomes unruliness. Your courage becomes reckless rebellion.
And the one that hit me the hardest, frankness becomes rudeness.
That's the one for our age, isn't it? We live in an era that worships a certain kind of authenticity. People say, I'm just being real, or I'm just being honest, as a justification for tearing someone apart.
Telling it like it is.
Confucius would say that is not a virtue. That is just aggression wrapped in a cloak of honesty. Frankness without the container of courtesy is destructive. Courtesy is what makes our truth bearable and therefore useful to other people.
It's the lubricant of the social machine. If you remove it, the gears grind and the whole thing explodes.
And the gentleman masters this balance. There is a beautiful description of the gentleman's presence, what he calls the three transformations. Looking from afar, he is stern. He has dignity, gravitas.
So he's not a pushover.
Not at all. Drawing near, he is warm. He isn't cold or arrogant or intimidating. He's approachable. And finally, listening to his speech, he is sharp. His words are precise, clear, and meaningful.
It's the perfect balance. Stern, warm, sharp. He's not a clown, but he's not a robot.
Exactly. Now remember, Confucius wasn't just giving self-help advice for individuals. He wanted these gentlemen to run the world. This was a political project.
Which brings us to segment 5, government by North Star.
A beautiful image.
It really is. He that rules by mind is like the North Star, steady in his seat, whilst the stars all bend to him.
Just think about what that implies. The North Star doesn't move, it doesn't hustle, it doesn't run around shouting orders or micromanaging. It just is. It holds its position. And because it is in the right place, everything else in the sky revolves around it, orients itself by it.
So true leadership is about moral gravity. It's not about being busy.
It's about being. If the leader is corrupt, everyone below him will be corrupt. If the leader is upright, the people will naturally align themselves with that goodness. It's the trickle-down theory of morality.
And because of this, he hated the idea of ruling by force or by a million complicated laws.
He had a deep critique of the school of thought we now call legalism. He says, and this is so important, guide the people by law, align them by punishment. They may shun crime, but they will want shame.
Want shame, meaning they will lack a sense of shame.
Right. They won't feel bad about doing wrong. They will just do a cost-benefit analysis of getting caught. They become clever criminals, not good citizens.
So what's the alternative?
He says, guide them by mind, align them by courtesy. They will learn shame and grow good.
He wants a conscience-based society, not a police-based society.
Because a police-based society is expensive, inefficient, and brittle. A conscience-based society is self-regulating. It's stronger because the control is internal, not external.
But he does have some specific and very strange-sounding policy ideas. My favorite is the rectification of names.
Ah, yes. When Zulu asks him, if a ruler gave you the keys to the government, what is the very first thing you would do?
And Confucius says, putting names right.
And Zulu, his practical disciple, literally laughs at him. He basically says, are you crazy? Are you that out of touch? The world is burning and you want to edit the dictionary.
But Confucius doubles down. He gets very serious.
He does. He lays out the logic, and it's flawless. He says, if names aren't right, words don't fit. If words don't fit, affairs go wrong. If affairs go wrong, courtesy and music droop. If courtesy and music droop, law and justice fail. It all connects.
Let's apply that to a modern example. What does he mean?
He means that if a CEO is looting the company for his own gain, but we call him a leader, the name is wrong. The word doesn't fit reality, and because the word is wrong, we can't properly address the problem.
If a father abandons his children, but we still call him father, we are confusing the ideal with the reality.
Exactly. If a peacekeeping force is actually just an invading army, the name is a lie that hides the truth. Confucius is saying that the first step to fixing any problem is to call it by its true name. You have to align language with reality. A ruler must be a ruler. A father must be a father. If the title doesn't match the action, the entire society is living a lie, and you can't build justice on a foundation of lies.
That is surprisingly, and maybe depressingly, relevant to modern politics.
Right.
The spin, the jargon, it's all about hiding reality behind the wrong names.
Confucius would say that is the root of the rot. Fix the language first.
He also plays a kind of grim game of survivor with government priorities. He lists them as faith, food, and troops.
Yes, his disciple Tsukung asks him what's essential for government, and those are the three. But then he pushes him.
He says, if you absolutely have to drop one, which one goes?
Confucius says, drop troops. You can survive without a standing army.
Okay, that makes some sense. And if you have to drop another one?
Drop food.
This is the radical part, drop food. People will starve to death. How can that be the right answer?
Confucius is hardcore here. His reasoning is chillingly clear. He says, from of old all men die. Death is an unavoidable fact of life. But, he says, without trust, a people cannot stand.
Without the faith of the people and their leaders.
Exactly. If the people do not trust the moral authority of the government, the society is already dead. It has ceased to be a community. It's just a group of desperate, isolated individuals fighting for scraps. Trust faith is the absolute bedrock. It is more important than life itself.
That is a standard I don't think many governments have ever lived up to.
It's the ultimate ideal. And how do we get there? How do we create these gentlemen leaders who can earn that trust?
Segment 6. Education and the joy of learning.
The book opens with this, the very first line of the Analects. To learn and then do is not that a pleasure.
He reframes learning right away.
Yeah.
It's not a chore you have to do to get a grade. It's a joy. It's a delight.
And notice the crucial second part, and then do. Or sometimes it's translated as, and then practice. It's not to learn and then take a test. It's to learn and then apply it. Morality is a skill, like tennis or playing the piano. You can't just read a book about it. You have to practice it every single day.
He was a huge advocate for study, but not blind study. He emphasized the balance of study and thinking.
Yes, that famous line, learning without thought is not. Thought without learning is dangerous.
Let's break those two halves down. Learning without thought is not.
Not just memorizing facts. You're a parrot. You're a human database. It's useless because you can't apply the knowledge in new situations.
And the second half, thought without learning is dangerous.
That's the really dangerous one. That's sitting in your basement with no facts, no data, no history, just your own biases and feelings, and convincing yourself you've solved the universe.
That leads to conspiracy theories and fanaticism.
Exactly. You need both. You need the raw data from learning and study, and you need the processing power of independent thought to make sense of it.
He was a tough teacher, though. He didn't suffer fools gladly. He used the one-corner rule.
He did. If I lift one corner and the other three are left unturned, I say no more. He refused to spoon-feed his students. He'd give you a piece of the puzzle, and he expected you to have the intellectual curiosity and drive to figure out the rest. If you weren't willing to do the mental heavy lifting, he wasn't going to drag you across the finish line.
And he hated glibness. He hated smooth talkers.
Despised it. He preferred the student who was slow to speak but quick to act.
But for all his rigor, he was incredibly accessible. He wasn't running an elite academy.
Not at all. There's that great line. From the man that paid in dried meat upwards, I have withheld teaching from no one.
And dried meat was basically the cheapest tuition you could possibly offer.
It was a symbolic gesture. He didn't care if you were rich or poor, a nobleman's son or a farmer's son. He only cared if you were hungry for truth. He democratized wisdom.
It is such a massive, coherent, and deeply human legacy. So let's bring it all home. We've looked at the man, the atheist-agnostic worldview, the discipline of love, The ideal of the gentleman and the North Star politics.
It's a complete system for living. His mission was to restore order to a broken, violent world. But he didn't try to fix it with a new god. He didn't try to fix it with promises of a heaven after death or threats of hell. He looked at the chaos of his time, the Holy Roman Empire of China, and said, the only way out is in.
We have to fix ourselves first.
We have to cultivate ourselves. We have to conquer ourselves. We have to treat each other with a rigorous, demanding, thoughtful love. It's a solution that requires no magic, only effort.
And that is the final thought I want to leave the listener with.
Bring it home for us.
Confucius built a moral code that held a massive civilization together for 2,000 years. And he did it without a supernatural carrot and without a supernatural stick. He didn't say, be good and you'll go to heaven. He didn't say, be good or the gods will smite you. He simply said, be good, because that is what a noble human being does.
That puts all of the responsibility entirely on us. There's nowhere to hide.
It does. In our world today, we are drowning in information. We have algorithms telling us what to buy, pundits telling us who to blame, and influencers telling us what to think. We are obsessed with the what. But Confucius asks us to focus on the how. How are you being? If you stripped away your job title, your social media profile, your bank account, are you just a vessel, a tool with a single purpose used by others? Or are you a gentleman, a whole moral human being who stands like a North Star in your own life?
That is a question worth answering.
See you in the next deep dive.